You read the title, you know why we're here. Today I'm going to be tier ranking all of the series I've read. Not long ago I did a tier ranking of all of my recent-ish reads, which I'll leave linked up in the cards, and today we're going to be doing the most basic version of this trend that I've seen going around, and that is tier ranking all of the series that I've read. The only stipulations for a series to be included here were A, I've read more than one book in the series, and B, it's any series that I've read like as an adult or like in the booktube era of my reading. There are a few series from like around my preteen years, but only like the most significant ones, if that makes sense. I'm not sure why I feel the need to clarify that, because it's not like you expect me to rank the A to Z mysteries that I read as a kid, but those aren't included on here. Surprise, surprise. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up the tier list. Now, as you can see, I've got a lot of tiers here. I needed a lot because I have varying opinions that couldn't be handled by like only 4 this time. Down at the bottom, there are 40 series, which is a lot, more than I expected, but that's why I made so many tiers, to accommodate 40 series. Most of the tiers are pretty self-explanatory. The only one I feel like I need to explain is Past Kristen Can't Be Trusted, which is all the way at the bottom. A large part of the reason that I wanted to do this is that a lot of my opinions on a lot of series are very outdated on here. Like in the past couple of years, there are some series that I've mentioned in passing and some that I've talked about a lot, but there are some that I just haven't talked about since the last time I like ranked my favorite series. Basically, that tier is reserved for series that I think my opinion has shifted on, but I can't be sure because I haven't reread it recently. So that's what's gonna happen with that tier, and we'll discuss it for each series, obviously. Okay, enough rambling, let's jump into the ranking. So right off the bat, as much as I wanna just go in order as they're listed down at the bottom, I think it'll actually be a little bit easier for me to at least get some sort of baseline for what some of these tiers mean to me. So I think what's going to be easiest for me is to start with some of the most obvious ones and then go back and go in order. Maybe, I don't know. So I think the easiest thing to start out with is to put Harry Potter into the untouchable tier. I mean, that's kind of a given for me. I don't want to get into the whole J.K. Rowling controversy thing, but I feel like I can't not talk about it when I'm talking about Harry Potter. Basically, I don't follow anything J.K. Rowling does outside of this series. All I care about is the proper Harry Potter series. I haven't read The Cursed Child. I haven't seen any of the movies that have been coming out. I solely care about the Harry Potter series, and I've made a concerted effort to not pay attention to anything J.K. Rowling does because I can't let her ruin that for me, because that story and that world and that series has such a deep-rooted meaning in my life. And as much as I don't like what J.K. Rowling has been doing, I can't let her ruin something that's that special to me. It's just a really tricky issue, and it's too big for me to talk about here, but Harry Potter as a series is too big of a part of my life and too influential in my life and one of my favorite things ever, and I have to put it in the untouchable tier because it can't go anywhere else. So the next one I want to get out of the way is the reason that I created the Past Kristen Can't Be Trusted tier, and that is the Mortal Instruments. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put the Mortal Instruments in that tier. I've touted this series as one of my favorites for the entirety of my channel. And regardless of the quality of the series or of Cassandra Clare, I think that it will always hold a special place in my heart because of the nostalgia and because it's just one that I've considered a favorite for a very long time. However, at least a year ago, it was probably almost 2 years ago at this point, Marinez from My Name is Marinez live tweeted her reactions to reading City of Bones for the first time. And I can't remember if she finished the book or if I just saw her live tweeting like the first chapter or two, but as she was tweeting about it, I was like, oh, this is bad. I don't like this. Like the quotes that she was posting and the commentary she was giving about it, I was like, yeah, I think if I read this now, I wouldn't enjoy this. And this was over a year ago that I saw this. And ever since then, I've seen more and more very valid criticisms of the series, and it's just made me completely question whether I would enjoy it now. Because thinking back, the first time I read it was either in 2011 or 2012, I can't remember, and then I reread it in like May of 2014, and I thought it'd been a long time between those reads, but it's been double that since 2014. If I were ranking this based just on my memory of it, it would go up in the amazing tier. That's where I would put it, because I just have very fond memories of it and I loved it, but I just don't trust that for current me. So I'm putting it in that tier, and that's basically the reason the tier was created. While we're at it, I'm going to do the same thing for the Infernal Devices because I have higher hopes for the Infernal Devices holding up better than the Mortal Instruments, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to put it in the same place. I'm realizing that I'm going to have a really hard time deciding what goes in like Untouchable and what goes in Amazing, because for me, there's only like 1 or 2 series I can put with Harry Potter, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit more in that tier. I don't know. We're going to go ahead and put the Diviners into Amazing tier because I don't think that I can put it into Untouchable tier because I haven't finished the series yet, but it definitely is way up there, and I think once I finish the series, it could potentially get into Untouchable tier, so I think Amazing tier is where it fits right now. I've been sitting here forever trying to figure this out. Let's just go ahead and do a really easy one. The Selection by Kiera Cass. Guess where this one's going? Trash tier. I did a video hate reading The Selection, and the only reason that I read it was because I thought it would be a fun book to read and kind of make fun of, and I was right. Okay, let's just start going through these. I've been just staring at this for too long. Across the Universe. I'm gonna put that into the past Kristen Can't Be Trusted tier, I think. I read this in like the first few months after discovering BookTube, and I was still kind of trying to figure out what I liked and what I didn't like. And this was a really cool like sci-fi dystopian that I actually really enjoyed. I read this very soon after discovering BookTube, and I didn't have a very clear idea of what some of the like really basic tropes in dystopia were, at least in YA dystopia. And this was at the time when everyone was obsessed with YA dystopia. And I loved it at the time, but I think if I reread it now, I would probably find it to be a very basic dystopian series. So that's why it's going in that tier, because I just don't think that it would hold up now if I reread it. Also, I think some people might not appreciate that I'm just saying, I don't think I'd like this now without any concrete proof, because it's not like I've reread these. My point in doing that and putting it there is that I think my opinion has shifted, but I haven't talked about that on here. So unless I talked about it on here, you would think that it would still be one of my favorite series of all time. And that's not necessarily how I think about it anymore. And I'm not sure I necessarily want to reread that and like possibly ruin it for myself. Or in all seriousness, it's not necessarily something I want to reread just in general, even if it wouldn't ruin it for me. So basically, instead of rereading it, I'm putting it in this tier and talking about it like this, saying I don't know if I'd enjoy it now, because I don't want to put it in great tier and talk about a really outdated opinion that I may not hold if I reread it now. Okay, next up is the Ascendance trilogy with The False Prince, and I think I'm gonna put this in the alright tier. I think I had a higher opinion of it when I first read it. I think I would have put it in the good tier at the very least, but I think my opinion has gone down on it a little bit. It's all right. Okay, Battle Royale. This one is either going in good or great, and I'm not totally sure which one to put it in. For now, I'm gonna put it in good. I might move some of these around at some point, but I'm gonna put it in good for now, and we'll see kind of how I feel about this as we continue on. Actually, while we're talking about Battle Royale, let's go ahead and talk about The Hunger Games, because they have similar premises. People have accused The Hunger Games of ripping off Battle Royale. It's a whole big thing. And if you've seen any of my videos where I talked about Battle Royale, you will know that I prefer Battle Royale to Hunger Games, and I think it's not meh tier. I think it's alright tier. I know that that's like blasphemy for some people, but it's alright. Here's the thing, I didn't read The Hunger Games when everyone else did. I was like too hipstery to read it in like 2011, 2012 when everyone was getting super hyped about it. I read it 2 years later when the hype was dying down and I was getting into BookTube, and I liked it. I think I gave The Hunger Games itself 5 stars. I might have bumped that down to 4 stars. But the subsequent books in the series just got worse and worse for me. I didn't really like Mockingjay that much, and the second one was alright but not amazing. It's just a series that I don't have the same nostalgia for as a lot of people do, and so therefore I don't enjoy it as much as most people do. I was about to say, so there's my first controversial opinion, but I think the first one was putting City of Bones in the can't be trusted tier. I just realized the next one up is the Bone season. I don't know where to put this one. I just don't know if I should put it... Can it be put in Untouchable tier? Can I do that? It's one of my favorite series of all time. It's either going in the Amazing or Untouchable tier. I want to put it in the Untouchable tier, but I haven't read book 3 yet. But I've given both of the first 2 books 10 out of 10 stars. I think for now I'm gonna put it in the Amazing tier, And if we have to move stuff around, we will. I just can't commit to the Untouchable tier yet. Next is the Charlie Bone series. This is one from my childhood. This is one from like, I guess my preteen years. And I think I'd put this solidly in like the good tier. This is a good middle grade that I enjoyed. At least I think it counts as middle grade. It's a pretty chunky book to be like a strict children's book. I think it's gotta be middle grade. Next is the Danganronpa manga series. I've talked about this one a lot recently. It's gonna go in the meh tier. This manga is an adaptation of an anime, which is an adaptation of a game. It's one adaptation too far. The story of the game is amazing, but the manga is not a great adaptation. And next up we have my favorite manga series, which I think I have to put into amazing tier. I can't go into untouchable tier, and I think it's too good for great tier. I think if this were like a couple months ago, I might have put it in great tier, but I'm rereading it currently and re-experiencing this story, and it's just amazing. In the years since I've read this, which was 4 years ago, I think that these like psychological battles are a type of story I've really started to gravitate toward even more. So I think that that's made me appreciate it even more on this reread. This next one's pretty easy. Divergent has to go in the bad tier. That's like the only option. Actually, Divergent itself could go in the past Kristen Can't Be Trusted tier, but the series as a whole has to go in the bad tier. I loved Divergent, the first book, but the other two I did not enjoy, so the bad tier. And I think even like a few years ago I was saying I'm not sure I would enjoy Divergent if I reread it, so I'm really not sure I would enjoy Divergent if I reread it. Okay, the next two are actually pretty recent reads, and we're gonna start with Doubt, which it's either all right or meh, and I'm not sure which one to put it in. I think it's gonna go in meh. This was one that I wanted to really love, but I didn't. Next is Erased, which is the manga that I'm currently reading, and dare I say, it's amazing tier? I want to put it in amazing tier so badly, but I feel like that might be a little bit preemptive, but it's so good. For now, I'm gonna put it in amazing tier, and let me explain why. I gave the first 2 volumes of this series, or basically the first bind up, I gave both of the volumes in there 5 stars out of 5. Do you know what other manga series has had that level of consistency? You're thinking I'm gonna say Death Note, but the answer is actually none. No manga series has ever gotten 5 out of 5 2 manga volumes in a row from me. With manga, I have a tendency to give most of them 4 stars, even if the series as a whole is 5 stars. And the first 2 volumes of Erased got full 5 out of 5 stars for me. That is unheard of. So I'm gonna put it there for now, even though I've only read the first 3 volumes, but I think that it's gonna continue to be amazing. So I'm gonna put it there. We'll see if I need to move it later. Next up is the Giant Days comic series, and that's a solid all right. I've kind of realized that comic series aren't necessarily my thing because they tend to be fairly episodic, but this was one that I enjoyed while reading it, but just obviously not enough to continue it because I haven't in a very long time. I want to say I've read the first 4 volumes of Giant Days, so I haven't finished it, obviously, but I did read the first 4 volumes. Next up is the Infernal Devices manga adaptation, which I've read all of. I'm gonna put this in the meh tier. I didn't really care that much about it when I read it when I was invested in the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices, and I super don't care about it now, but it was meh. Next up we have the Liar Game manga series, which is another one that I've read very recently, and this one is gonna go in the amazing tier. This one was just really, really good. I'm starting to wonder if making the great tier was a mistake now, because I'm really not sure what I'm gonna put in there. We'll see. Next up is Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and this one is gonna go right there with Hunger Games in the alright tier, which I know is gonna disappoint a lot of people, but hear me out. I've only read the first 3 Percy Jackson books because that was all that was out when I read them. I read these back like in middle school, and I actually read them not long before the 4th book came out, and then I never read the 4th book because I wasn't as invested. I think I reread The Lightning Thief in like 2012 or something, but I clearly didn't care enough to continue rereading the rest of the series, and at this point I don't think I ever will. Okay, next up we have Lock and Key, which I think I'm gonna put into the past Kristen Can't Be Trusted tier, but for very different reasons than the other ones. Lock and Key was the first comic series that I ever read, but it was also the first novel in graphic form that I ever read. I hadn't read any manga, I hadn't read any comics, I hadn't read any graphic novels. This was the first one. And because it was my first like novel in a graphic form, I think I just didn't fully get it, I guess. Like it was just this whole new way of experiencing a story, and I don't think I fully appreciated it yet. So I didn't really enjoy it very much, and I think that that opinion might change if I reread it now that I have read several stories in graphic form. Next up we have another comic series, and that is Lumberjanes, and I'm gonna put that actually in the meh tier. I wanted to enjoy Lumberjanes so much, but my lack of enjoyment of it boils down to just it being so episodic and that not being what I wanted out of a series. The premise sounded super cool, the art looked super cool, but it just didn't work for me. Next up we have the Lux series, and this one I've read the first 3 books in the series, and I'm kind of torn between the alright tier and good tier. I think it fits more with the good tier. It's been a couple years since I read book 3, but I enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed every book in the series. They're very addicting. Jennifer L. Armentrout's books are always very addicting. A reviewer that I follow on Goodreads described Lux as if Jennifer L. Armentrout took everything about Twilight, good, bad, ugly, and put it into a series and said, I'm gonna make you like this. That's what Lux would be, and that makes so much sense to me. I literally read that in a review like 3 years ago, and that has stuck with me ever since, and that's kind of how I feel about this series. Like, is it amazing? No. Is it kind of cliche? Yeah. Is it kind of Twilighty? Yeah. But somehow she makes you enjoy it. Does that mean we should talk about Twilight now? Because we can. Twilight's on here. Should we put it in the bad tier? Or should we put it in the past Kristen can't be trusted tier? Honestly, either of them works. I think bad tier works better because I know objectively that it is bad. Like basically everyone else my age, I read this in high school in like 2008, and everyone loved it, and I really loved it. But it is objectively bad. And I could be like, oh, I can't trust past Kristen, let's put it in that tier. But I know for sure that I wouldn't like it now. Like, all of the things that I know are in there, I would not enjoy now, and I know that for a fact. Okay, moving on to Cinder, or the Lunar Chronicles, and I think this one might actually be our first great tier? I think great tier works because it's definitely not amazing tier. That was not even in consideration. I was looking at either good or great, and I think that I like it more than the ones that I put in good tier. Now I'm looking at that and considering moving Battle Royale up to great tier with Cinder. I'm gonna leave it there for now, but I might return to this later. Thankfully, I think the next one is gonna be fairly easy because, as you might be able to tell, we've got Mistborn. Where is Mistborn gonna go? I don't know. Maybe into the Untouchable tier where it belongs, obviously. I haven't read it in 5 years, but this is one of those series where I feel really confident that it would totally hold up. In fact, I'm planning on rereading it later this year. I absolutely fell in love with the series when I read it, and it was fantastic, and The Final Empire is still one of my favorite books of all time. It's amazing, but technically better than amazing. It's untouchable. Next up, we have another interesting one because I think that Monster is actually going to be another past Kristen can't be trusted tier. I've only read the first 5 volumes of Monster, not of the perfect edition, but of the original volumes, the first 5. And I thought it was all right. I think I gave 1 volume 4 stars and I gave the rest 3 stars. However, this is one of the manga that I really want to reread at some point so that I can finish the series, and I think that when I do, I will enjoy it even more. Like I talked about with Death Note, the whole like psychological battle of wits thing is something that I've gotten more and more into as time has gone on, and that's basically what Monster is. So I think that when I eventually reread those first 5 volumes and continue the series, I will really, really enjoy it. Next up, we have the Orange manga series, which is one that makes me weep like a little baby. And I think it's gonna go into the great tier. That I think is where it fits. It's not quite amazing tier, but it's close. But what is amazing tier is the next one up on the list, which is Pendragon, and it is going in the amazing tier. Pendragon is one of the series from my childhood, or at least from my like preteen years, from like middle school, and I have always really enjoyed this one. It's been a long time favorite, and it couldn't go anywhere else. Next up we have Miss Peregrine's, which I wanted to call a trilogy, but I think there's been another book added. Either way, I've only read the first 2 books in this series because I didn't totally love it. I think it's a meh tier. I think it's meh. Honestly, I think this one is the poster child for the meh tier because I barely remember anything about it and I care even less about it. This series was just really unmemorable for me, and I think that I gave the first book 3 stars and the second book 4 stars, but I don't remember, honestly. Next up is Agatha Christie's Poirot series, and this one I think goes in the good tier. I haven't read any of these in a while, so I think I'm still at around 10 or 11 Poirot books that I've read, which is only about a third of them, but I've read a sizable number. I think so far none of the books have been like absolutely amazingly mind-blowing or anything, but I've enjoyed reading every single one of them, and I love Agatha Christie, so good tier. Next up is the Reckoners trilogy, and I find it funny that these are the 2 Brandon Sanderson series that I have on here, Mistborn and the Reckoners, because they're respectively my favorite and least favorite Brandon Sanderson series. But it's still gonna go in the great tier. As much as I love Brandon Sanderson, superheroes and superpowers aren't necessarily my favorite thing, but I did enjoy this series, but it's also not as good as any of the other Brandon Sanderson stuff that I've read. Warbreaker is a standalone right now, but if it were a series, it would go in the untouchable tier because it's amazing. I mean, I'm talking as if I didn't like this. It's still in the great tier, which is above almost everything else. Next up is Saga, and honestly, this alright tier should just be relabeled like the overrated tier or the I underrated tier, because that's where Saga belongs for me, because everyone loves it, but I thought it was just alright. I liked Saga, but I never got invested enough in it to keep up with it, and I fell behind, and now I'm probably never gonna catch up. So for me, it's just alright. Next up, we have another BookTube favorite, which is the Shades of Magic trilogy, and I think this one's gonna go in the meh tier. This is a trilogy that I wanted to love so much, but it was so disappointing and super, like, not memorable for me, and very, like, tropey and cliched, and I didn't love it, so the meh tier feels right. I just realized we're kind of getting ourselves stuck in a very meh rut right now because the Scott Pilgrim series is next, and it's either going in alright or in meh. I have to put it in meh. I can't justify putting it in alright, so it's another meh series. Series of Unfortunate Events. This one is gonna go in the alright tier. Like I said, this one isn't necessarily like overrated for me. I just liked it, but I didn't love it. I read Series of Unfortunate Events as a kid, but it wasn't one that I ever was super invested in, and I think that I didn't read the last book until well after it came out. Although Series of Unfortunate Events was like a really, really big deal, it was kind of just one I casually enjoyed. Because of that, I can't put it up where Charlie Bone is with the good tier, so it's gotta go in the alright tier. The next one's a fun one. We have Shatter Me, which I was about to call a Shatter Me trilogy, but it is now a series. But I've only read the trilogy, and it's still gonna go in the trash tier. The number of times I have considered changing my rating on Shatter Me specifically to a 1 star is shocking. I think I only have 2 books on my Goodreads, 1 or 2, rated 1 star, and Shatter Me might make 3. This was one of the ones that I read when I was first getting into BookTube, and I kind of thought I enjoyed it at the time, but I didn't like it, and I really didn't like Shatter Me at the time. Like, even at the time, I recognized that I did not like Shatter Me. Next up, we have 7 Princes of the Thousand Year Labyrinth, which is a very recent read. I just finished this series a few days ago, and it's probably gonna go in either the alright tier or the good tier. I think it's gonna go in the alright tier. I gave the series and all of the volumes in it 3 stars out of 5, and although I enjoyed it, I think it's gonna be one of those series that becomes forgettable the more time passes, even though I enjoyed it in the moment. Next, we have another recent read, which is Tokyo Game, and I think I'm gonna put that right there with 7 Princes of the Thousand Year Labyrinth. I think they're kind of similar in terms of my opinion on them, so I think they both go in the same tier. Strike that. I don't have similar opinions on them, but I think that they average out to similar opinions. So that's why they're in the same tier. And now we have Truly Devious, which, like, I want to put it in the amazing tier, but I think it might fit better in the great tier. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the great tier, but I'm also about to do a little bit of finagling with the great and the good tiers, so hold on a second. I think Cinder belongs with these books. I think Battle Royale goes up here, and I think that this might go down here. Is that what I think? That feels more right, to have those three in the great tier and to have these in the good tier. I don't know, this one's kind of the outlier in both, because I don't think it's quite up to these, but I also think it's better than these. I'm not sure. The more I think about it, the more I recognize that I really enjoyed the Lunar Chronicles, but it hasn't really stuck with me as a favorite in the way that some other series have. So I think that right here is correct for it. And I think that's also why I'm putting the Reckoners in this tier as well. So I think this is our final list. I think this is the final tier ranking. If I'm honest, it feels kind of weird seeing the Mortal Instruments and Clockwork Angel all the way down in that bottom tier, because they have been so consistently favorite series for me, but I just don't know at this point, so I couldn't really put them anywhere else. But everything else I think is placed in the best spot that it can be. And I need to stop thinking about it because I might start fiddling with it again. So that is my tier ranking of the 40 series that I have read more than one book of. Let me know down in the comments what you think of these series. Kindly, respectfully, please and thank you. Links to all my social media are down in the description, especially Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I'd love to be friends with all of you on Goodreads. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.